Hello hunters, and welcome back to Super Fan Natural. Gods. In most mythologies, both real and fictional, the top of the celestial food chain is occupied by powerful beings known as gods. The exact nature of these gods can vary depending on culture or creative property, but usually when something is identified as a god, it means it's incredibly powerful and has some connection to the creation or inner workings of the universe. Supernatural is no different. The show's top dog is a supremely powerful cosmic entity known simply as God, or Chuck Shirley, who's basically an interpretation of the Abrahamic God. He's created pretty much everything, and the world he made includes angels, demons, heaven, hell, purgatory, a Garden of Eden. There are plenty of differences, but ultimately, the universe of Supernatural is firmly steeped in Abrahamic lore. However, one thing that's a bit strange about the show is that God isn't the only god in it. Throughout the series, we see a host of other deities from a variety of mythologies, including Egyptian, Hindu, Greco-roman, Chinese, Norse, Slavic, Babylonian, and more. This contradictory cosmology was confusing for a couple reasons. Firstly, a good chunk of these other gods, sometimes referred to as deities, pagan gods, or just pagans, they didn't really act like the gods they were based off of, or even gods at all. Many acted more like monsters who maybe shared a few traits with the deities they identified as. Now, this could be explained with the logic that things are different in the world of Supernatural, and myths often get details wrong, and at the end of the day, not every mystery needs an answer. Except the show gave fairly solid explanations for most of its creatures, yet for the longest time, the existence of these pagan gods was left completely unexplained. We did eventually get an answer, but not only is it very easy to miss, it can also come off a little confusing. In this video, I'll not only explain where these deities came from, I'll also list out all the ones that showed up in the series and give a little info about them. Before we get into the origins of the pagans, let's get a feel for what they're like and how they operate. That's more complicated than you might think, because by God, there's a lot of variety amongst these deranged deities. Some look human, others don't. Some are fairly powerful, while others can barely do anything. There's a lot going on with this group. However, there are a few characteristics that many of them share. Firstly, as supernatural beings, they're all superhumanly strong and aren't usually all that hurt by regular injuries. Each god has their own unique abilities, weaknesses, and kill methods, but a fair few of them can be put down with a blood-soaked wooden stake made from a tree that's native to their myth's region of origin. Next up, most of the pagans feed on humans, either to sustain themselves or just for fun. Sometimes they're picky about who they eat, but most have some kind of taste for human flesh or blood. One of the more interesting quirks that some of them share is a belief in their own mythology, even in the face of contradictory evidence. For example, during the literal Judeo-Christian apocalypse, the Norse god Odin laughed at the idea that they had to worry about Lucifer, because obviously the world was going to end with Ragnarok. During that same episode, it was made clear that some of the gods are generally confused when it comes to history and time. Odin and Zhao Shen got in an argument about who came first, and later, the Hindu goddess Kali stated that she predated Chuck, and also implied that she saw him as the same kind of being as herself and the other pagans. Not all of them are delusional. In fact, it was the Roman goddess Fortuna who finally gave us the origins of the pagan gods, but even the more level-headed gods still believe themselves to be, well, gods. They see themselves as better than humans and feel entitled to praise and worship. So most of the gods don't really have a positive view of humans, but that doesn't mean that the relationship is always completely negative. We do see a few pagan gods who are willing and able to dish out blessings to people or communities that provide them with regular human sacrifices. Blessings we see or hear about include fair weather, healthy crops, long life, good fortune, enhanced physical abilities, stuff like that. It doesn't seem like any of the ones we saw had the juice to make big wishes come true, things like reviving the dead or curing terminal disease. You know, the stuff that people in the modern day would actually consider killing for. Don't get me wrong, agriculture is a vital industry. It's just that between modern tech, GMOs, and global trade, there's going to be less people who see murder as a reasonable price for good crops. It's also worth noting that some of the gods can be a little weird about how they distribute their blessings. One pair of pagans would prey on people who bought their reeds, and after feeding, they'd give the entire town warm weather, even though none of the sacrifices were willing, and nobody even knew gods were involved. So with all of that out of the way, let's answer the big question. What the hell are these things? Are they really gods? Where did they come from, and did they have a hand in creating mankind? Well, the answer to that last point is no. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. What do I mean? If we believe Fortuna, then the pagan gods were sort of a collaborative creation between humanity and capital G God. At some point in the distant past, Chuck realized that many people across the world either didn't believe in or didn't know about him, and instead they came up with their own gods to explain the world. Initially he was peeved, but eventually he came to see the value in having other deities to take the heat for bad things. So he took the gods that humans had thought up and made them real, though it's clear he intentionally made them less powerful and more monstrous, probably as a way to ensure that he stayed the only legit god. So yeah, in the world of supernatural, the pagan gods are basically violent imaginary friends thought up by man and brought to life by the big man. In that way, they're kind of like tulpas, though it's a little more complicated since they're actually sentient beings who aren't necessarily updated by changes in their story. This backstory wasn't revealed until the final season, but the idea behind it was actually present since the very beginning. Series creator Eric Kripke has said that Supernatural was heavily inspired by the book American Gods, which revolves around the idea that gods and monsters can be created and sustained by the power of human belief. It's a really interesting concept, one that you could apply to Chuck himself if you really wanted. I mean, obviously it's the intent of the writers for Chuck to be the legit god, but I mean, we see that humans can believe things into existence, things with otherworldly powers and traits. With that in mind, it's not really impossible that this supposed creator could actually be a creation who, like the other gods, believes a story that was written for him. Alright, that's enough general info. Now let's talk about the gods that actually showed up in the series. For this video, I'm only going to discuss the characters as they are presented in the show. I'm not really going to talk much about the differences between the show's lore and the real-world legends. I decided to sort the deities by pantheon, with the first one we'll discuss being the Norse pantheon. The show features 7 Norse gods and sort of hints at the existence of a few others. The first one we saw was actually the very first deity to appear in the show, that being the Vanir. Vanir are a subspecies of deity that can provide protection and prosperity to their worshippers, though obviously that costs human life. Apparently different Vanir have different MOs, but we only ever see one who isn't given a name beyond the Vanir. This particular Vanir lived in a magical tree which was brought to America by Scandinavian immigrants who founded a town called Burkittsville. In order to get the god's blessing, the townsfolk were required to sacrifice 1 male and 1 female every year, and they were given health, good crops, good weather, and general prosperity. Unlike pretty much every other deity in the show, the Vanir didn't have a physical body. So, come feeding time, it would possess a scarecrow-like effigy that the townies had made. One benefit to this was that the Vanir couldn't be killed by physical damage to the scarecrow. No, to kill this thing, you needed to burn down the sacred tree, which happens at the end of the episode. It doesn't really show off any superpowers other than super strength and the whole possession thing, and then the general blessings that we just kind of get hinted at, so it's not necessarily the most powerful god, but it is kind of the most unique. So, this next character isn't actually a god, but he posed as one, and he's kind of important, so I felt the need to bring him up here. In the Season 2 episode Tall Tales, we're introduced to the Trickster, a kind of demigod with the power to bend reality in all sorts of wacky ways. According to lore, tricksters use their powers to mess with people who they believe need to be taken down a peg. You know, abusers, manipulators, people who are smug, arrogant, or entitled, basically people who you want to punch in the face. Also, unlike other gods, tricksters don't have a taste for people, but rather they have a crazy sweet tooth, meaning that you can usually find candy wrappers near the scene of their attack. So here's the thing. It seems like tricksters are actually a thing in Supernatural. However, the one that the Winchesters deal with is eventually revealed to be the Archangel Gabriel. In the distant past, he ran away from heaven to escape the stress of home life and took on the identity of a trickster. Apparently, his disguise was so effective, he was able to fool not only deities, but also angels. That's probably because archangels are orders of magnitude more powerful than either, and also Gabriel's personality was very trickster-esque in the first place. I bring him up here because we eventually found out that the other gods knew him as Loki, a fact we learn in the Season 5 episode, Hammer of the Gods. Speaking of that episode, that's when we meet the next 2 Norse gods. This episode centers around a group of deities that met up at a hotel in order to make plans for the apocalypse. Among the guests are 2 fairly big names in Norse mythology, Balder and the Allfather himself, Odin. Pretty sweet, right? Well, the thing is, neither of them ended up really doing anything. Balder at least put in some work off-screen, as he seems to be one of the 2 gods who organized the meeting. Odin, on the other hand, well, he just kind of ended up being a glorified cameo. He's just kind of there. He gets in an argument with another god and tells the rest of the group how he's not worried about the archangels, but that's pretty much it. Neither get to show off any cool powers or really put up a fight, as Lucifer shows up and just kind of slaughters them like nothing. Balder gets a satanic fist through his chest, and Odin gets his head crushed with a sick Bruce Lee stomp. A lot of people found this to be a big waste of Odin especially, and yeah, it was, but there was a reason. At the time, it seemed like the show was going to end with season 5, so I guess someone figured that since they hadn't really used some of the more popular gods from around the world, why not give them a little cameo and show off how powerful Lucifer is? I'm very certain that if they knew there was going to be more seasons, they would have saved Odin for later, which would have been a good call since the first Thor movie came out about a year later and really boosted his already high popularity. The next Norse god to appear is one that's kind of easy to miss since he doesn't have the name recognition of his brother. In the second episode of Season 8, we met a guy named Vili as he retrieved an old bone from his safety deposit box. We don't get a lot of info about this dude, but in real Norse mythology, Vili is one of Odin's brothers who helped him take out the frost giant Ymir. Since Vili claims that his special bone is one of Ymir's fingers, then I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be the same guy. This dude doesn't do much. The most interesting thing about him is that he sells his giant bone for a little item known as Mjolnir, Thor's freaking hammer. He doesn't get to use it, but he does get to see it in action when Sam brings the hammer down on the old god, destroying him. Also, we never actually see Thor in the show, but what with the hammer and the fact that he gets mentioned a few times, it's pretty safe to assume a version of him exists in Supernatural. The last few Norse gods to appear in the show were not only featured in the same episode, they were one big family. Earlier I mentioned how Gabriel would masquerade as Loki, but what I may not have made clear was that he didn't invent that identity. There was actually a real Loki in Supernatural, and in season 13, the episode Unfinished Business, we got to see him in action along with his 3 sons, Fenrir, Sleipnir, and Narfi. See, Gabe and Loki used to be tight. That is until Lucifer killed Loki's dad, Odin. After that, the trickster blamed Gabriel for not stopping his brother, so he and his kids captured the archangel and sold him to the demon Asmodeus. Fast forward a few years, and Gabriel gets free, torches the demon, and sets out to terminate the family that betrayed him. Despite being much weaker than an actual archangel, Loki was still pretty powerful. As an actual trickster, he could use some of the tricks we saw from Gabriel in earlier seasons, things like creating illusions, duplicating himself, and telekinesis. He also knew a spell that could effectively bind an archangel, which is really impressive. His kids, on the other hand, well, they weren't nearly quite as cool. Side note, according to Gabriel, these 3 weren't actually gods so much as god-begotten monsters, though since we never find out what exactly that means, I'm going to consider them close enough to being actual deities. Anyway, all 3 had the ability to manifest this weird green spirit face thing that's implied to be their true forms. Fenrir's looked like a wolf, which makes sense, not only because his real-world counterpart is a wolf, but also at least one group of werewolves in-universe worship this dude as their god. Like Supernatural's werewolves, he could grow claws and fangs, so was his mom a werewolf or something? Who knows, but whatever the case, he was a good enough fighter to hold his own against a weakened Gabriel for a bit. That's more than I can say for his brothers. Neither of them really showed off any sick tricks, except for the ghost face thing, with Narfi's looking like a skull and Sleipnir's like a horse. Ultimately, each member of the family was taken out by a special wooden sword made by Gabriel. That's it for Norse mythology. Now let's talk about how the show handled another super popular pantheon, the Greco-roman one. I'm going to combine Greek and Roman gods into one section because I feel like it. The first is Mercury, Roman god of commerce and communication. This guy appeared in Hammer of the Gods, working at the hotel where the meeting took place, though he mostly served as a subordinate to the other gods, doing grunt work like setting up the hotel and wrangling the guests. His role as a messenger god could also be seen in his approach to conflict. He suggested talking it out with the archangels, and after that got shot down in favor of glorious battle, he went behind the other god's back in order to contact Lucifer in order to try and make some kind of deal. That didn't work out since Lucy just laughed and snapped his neck, which I guess killed him. It's a shame too, he could have been a force to be reckoned with, thanks to his super speed, which allowed him to move so fast he could cut someone and run away without being seen. The next episode to feature a Roman deity was Season 6, Episode 6, You Can't Handle the Truth, which features the Roman goddess Veritas. As you may have guessed from the name of the episode or the character, Veritas was a god of truth. She could compel people to answer any question truthfully, and the only way to resist the effect was to somehow not have a soul. Her powers could be invoked via a spell, but it came with a few downsides. Not only would the caster compel the truth from others, random people around them would start confessing their secrets. This may seem cool, but eventually the weight of all that unfiltered truth would drive most people to opt out of life. This is what Veritas wanted, as she could take the victims as tribute and feed off of their bodies, especially the tongue. You may have noticed I said victims plural, and that's because once Veritas is summoned, she tended to stick around the town for a while, and anyone who would ask for the truth would be granted her blessing. Veritas was one of the few gods who had an inhuman true form. In her case, she had cat-like eyes and teeth. Since she was literally a crazy cat lady, dogs were her mortal enemy, as her presence would drive them nuts, and their blood was toxic to her. Veritas was also one of the few gods to have a legit full-time job, as she was a reporter for an Illinois news station up until the Winchesters put her down. Season 6 gave us another helping of Greco-Roman mythology in the form of the Fates. Well, Fate, specifically Atropos, though the other two are mentioned. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't actually know if the Fates are supposed to be pagan deities or not. Part of the confusion comes from the fact that, unlike most of the other gods in the list, the Fates actually worked directly with heaven. In fact, Atropos claimed that she got her job from capital G God himself. The exact nature of said job is a bit confusing in and of itself. Essentially, she and her sisters were tasked with ensuring that Chuck's big apocalyptic finale happened just as he planned, I think. One of the things that makes understanding their role difficult is the fact that by the time we actually met one, their contract with heaven had been terminated, thanks to Team Free Will derailing the Armageddon. Now, changing the future is one thing. However, even while out of work, the Fates couldn't stomach major changes to the past. So, when the angel Balthazar went back in time and saved the Titanic, Atropos took it upon herself to track down and final destination all the newly introduced souls that were created from the change in the timeline. Once she started targeting the Winchesters, Cass steps in to stop her, and she nearly gets sniped by Balthazar using a special anti-fate knife. However, with the threat of her sister's eternal wrath and the civil war in heaven, Cass decided to just unchange the past by sinking the boat, thus pacifying Atropos. After all that, we don't see her again, so who knows what she does with her time from then on. Speaking of time, our next deity is all about time. That's because we're now talking about the Greek god of time, Kronos. I'm not entirely sure if this guy is supposed to be the Titan Kronos, or Kronos, the personification of time itself. Whatever the case, this dude was a godly monster with powers that allowed him to see and travel through time, though his control over these abilities was a bit spotty. See, Kronos could time travel, just not at will. Instead, he would periodically be pulled into a random time and place, seemingly against his will. He didn't seem to have much control over the jump, but he could gain the ability to decide where and when he landed. To do that, he needed to feed on people by sucking out their, time energy. After mummifying 3 people, Kronos could decide when he spent his free time, unless of course he was magically summoned by someone wanting to know about their future. When he wasn't fortune-telling, Kronos, aka Ethan, preferred to spend his free time dating a woman named Lila in 1940. In the Season 7 episode, Time After Time, Dean accidentally tags along with the god as he warps back in time. After teaming up with Elliot Ness, Dean manages to tell Sam where and when to summon Kronos from, allowing Dean to hitch a ride back to the present, where he manages to gank the god with a special olive branch. Hey, remember a little bit ago when I talked about the Norse god Vili buying Thor's hammer? Well, now let's talk about where he got it from, or rather whomst he got it from. That would be the Roman god of greed, Plutus. We don't get a whole lot of info about this dude, but one thing we do learn is that he loves collecting cool stuff, and same. One thing that's kind of interesting about the Lord of the Horde here is how he judges the worth of an item. Obviously, he looks for rarity and power, but he also has an eye for personal value. He was willing to sell a prophet of the Lord for a single human soul, despite the fact that the King of Hell Crowley offered him many more. His reason for this was because the soul in question was the prophet's mom, and since her soul was her most valuable asset, it was worth a lot more. Ultimately, he fails to claim his new soul, as he gets literally stabbed in the back with a wooden stake. This betrayal came from his employee Bo, who apparently was also a deity, however we don't know anything about him, so this will be his only shoutout. The next gaggle of Greek gods all showed up in the Season 8 episode, Remember the Titans. The episode centers around one particular titan, Prometheus, though we don't get a whole lot of information about him or his powers. All we know is that a long time ago, he was slapped with a curse that caused him to die every single day. Sometimes he would be taken out by external shenanigans, sometimes a heart attack would do him in, but whatever happened, he would stay dead for a few hours before miraculously reviving and healing. Due to a combination of age and trauma, he no longer remembered who or even what he was, and as a result, we don't really get to see him use any cool Titan powers, though he did have some surprise fighting skills baked into his muscle memory. I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little confused about the reason behind his curse. It's presented as a punishment for stealing fire from Mount Olympus as a gift for humanity. However, considering what we know about the origins of the gods and the timeline of the universe, I don't know if the ancient theft actually happened. Even if it didn't, Prometheus was one of the very few gods who was in no way antagonistic. Instead, he was 100% a victim that the Winchesters tried to save. They didn't necessarily succeed, since he ended up getting perma-killed by divine arrows at the end of the episode. However, with the last of his strength, he managed to take out the guy who cursed him, so that's pretty cool. Now, you may be asking, who exactly would have the power to curse a Titan? Well, that would be the king of Mount Olympus himself, Zeus. Yes, the head honcho of the Greek gods makes an appearance, and unlike Odin, he wasn't completely wasted. Instead of being a cameo, Zeus was the main antagonist of the episode, as he not only cursed Prometheus in the past, he also refused to undo his punishment in the present. Apparently, this version of Zeus was divinely petty and enjoyed watching his enemies suffer forever. After being summoned, he used telekinesis and a sort of cool lightning powers effect to torture the Titan. So yeah, not exactly a guy you want beef with. According to the lore, Zeus could be slain with a wooden stake made from a tree that had been struck by lightning. That's already pretty sick, however, his actual death was somehow even cooler. After having a god-killing arrow shot his way, Zeus used Prometheus as a meat shield to intercept the attack. However, after being hit, the mortally wounded Titan managed to push the arrow through his body in order to impale and kill the king of the gods, which is one of the most badass ways to go out. So yeah, Zeus didn't make it, but at least he wasn't completely wasted, right? So I brought up this god-killing arrow several times now, but I haven't yet explained where it came from. That particular Deus Exterminating Machina was brought to the battlefield by the Greek goddess of hunters, Artemis. Artemis is the daughter of Zeus, and at one point the lover of Prometheus. She was taxed by Thunder Daddy to hunt down and capture the Titan. However, she developed a soft spot for the poor bastard and let him go until 2013, when one of his deaths made the news. In my opinion, Artemis is one of the most underused deities in the show. As I said, she is the goddess of hunters, the career of the two main characters. Sam even says that people like him used to pray to her for help taking out tough monsters, and considering the fact that she carries extra potent magic weapons, it's not hard to see why she used to have legit followers. I'm not entirely sure why her fanbase withered, but considering her loyalty to Zeus, who doesn't seem to have a high opinion of mankind, I wonder if she was ordered to stop giving whatever help she used to. Whatever the case, Artemis shows up to assist her dad in fighting the Winchesters. However, Sam manages to persuade her to stand up against Zeus, and by persuade, I mean he pretty much just lies to her. To be fair, she does seem fed up with her dad's pettiness. Whatever the exact reason, she ends up shooting him with a magic arrow, and afterwards she teleports away with Zeus's body, and we never see her again. So, there's one more character from this episode that I have to talk about, but he's not exactly a god. While Prometheus was wandering the world, he kinda sorta ended up making a baby with a human woman. This kid, Oliver, was some sort of demigod, though we don't get a whole lot of information about his condition. We do, however, know that he somehow inherited his dad's curse, meaning that after the age of 7, he started dying and coming back to life every single day. He also stopped talking for some reason. That doesn't get explained, but I personally think it might have something to do with paying the child actor. Anyway, it seems like his curse died with Zeus. However, we don't know if that means that he's mortal now, or if he'll still live forever, or what. Moving on, we've got a particularly fiery Roman goddess who preferred people who didn't get hot and heavy. The Season 9 episode, A Rock in a Hard Place, centers around Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and her slightly confusing scheme to adapt to the modern world. See, back in the olden times, Vesta would bless Romans with a good harvest so long as they surrounded her with a particular type of person, virgins. Yes, Vesta had a vested interest in people who didn't plow. She apparently needed virgins to tend to some kind of magical fire that gave her power, but once Christianity took over, she lost her sexless servants, her fire went out, and she was forced to come up with a new game plan. In the 21st century, she decided to set up a religious chastity group for people who wanted to pledge an oath to abstinence for one reason or another. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't fully understand how this setup was supposed to work exactly. I guess this handful of people were sort of indirectly worshipping her, but then if someone broke their vows and did the deed, she would capture, starve, and eat them, which kind of makes it seem like she was trying to get people to bang so that she could feed on them. But then what exactly was the point of the virginity club? I don't know. Whatever her goal was, she at least rolled with a bit of style. While out on the hunt, Vesta would engulf herself in blue flames that she had complete control over, meaning that she could make them harmless or deadly. She also had some degree of extrasensory perception that allowed her to detect the damage within Sam, though weirdly, she couldn't sense the presence of the angel that was possessing him at the time. This ESP also let her know when people be fucking, so she could come by and abduct them afterwards, but at least she let them finish. Ultimately, she got taken out by Jody wielding a wooden stake drizzled with virgin blood. Next up, we've got the only pagan god to share an episode with the non-pagan god. That would be the villain of Supernatural's 200th episode, Calliope. This chick was the Greek goddess of epic poetry, though in this context, poetry is less roses are red and more the Odyssey. Calliope's whole deal is that she loves a good story, and when she sniffs out an artist with a vision that she has interest in, she'll supercharge their creative juices in order to help them manifest the best version of their story. Then, once their creative vision has been realized, Calliope devours the artist as tribute. The show's 200th episode centers around her final target, a high school theater geek who's given the chance to write and direct a musical play about her favorite series, Supernatural. Oh yeah, in the universe, there's a series of books called Supernatural that retell the events of the first 5 or so seasons. They're written and published by God in his Chuck Shirley persona. Look, it's weird and complicated. All you gotta know is that some people, like Marie, are huge, obsessed fans, which I gotta say is pretty pathetic. I mean, imagine being enthralled by a story like Supernatural. I mean, come on, guys. Anyway, Calliope liked her interesting creative vision, so she makes the play possible and uses a recreation of the Vonner to neutralize any threats to its production. The play does end up happening, and apparently the audience loved it. In fact, Chuck himself shows up to give the director a not bad. Calliope doesn't get to meet him though, as Sam stakes her in the back before the final curtain call. The show's last Greco-roman deity was actually the very last little g god to appear in the series. Her name is Fortuna, and as you may have guessed from her name, she is the goddess of luck and fortune. Fortuna is interesting because she seems to be one of the most level-headed and self-aware deities in the series. As I mentioned earlier, she's the one who finally revealed the origins of godkind, and considering what we saw from some of her kin, it seems like she may be one of the only gods to know the truth. She's also one of the more fair gods. I mean, she still preys on humans, but in a slightly less directly predatory way. As the goddess of fortune, Fortuna has the power to manipulate luck, which in Supernatural is a tangible magical force. In the modern day, she used her powers to set up a magical bar where people could play pool in order to get a little extra luck. The way it works is simple. 2 people will each ante up an equal amount of their own luck, they play a game of pool, and the winner takes all the luck. Under the right circumstances, this wouldn't necessarily be a bad setup, but like any form of gambling, it has a very toxic element to it. See, anyone who's desperate enough to take this gamble doesn't really have a strong incentive to leave the bar with less luck than they came in with, meaning that losers tend to just hang around and play games until they either come up on top or run out of luck, at which point they die. There's also the fact that Fortuna is said to be skimming a little bit off the top of each transaction, meaning that even if you do win, you don't get the full payout. Still, despite her sleazier qualities, she does have a degree of integrity uncommon amongst deities, as she was moved by the Winchesters' heroism, so she willingly closed up shop and zeroed out everyone's luck balance, except of course for Sam and Dean, who she gifts enough luck to take on God himself. Alright, let's move away from Europe and talk about one of the most famous non-white pantheons, the Egyptian gods. There's 3 that appear in the show, though it's extremely easy to miss the first one. Among the god convention in Season 5 was the Egyptian goddess Isis, though this barely even counts as a cameo since she doesn't say or do anything, and the only reason you would be able to ID her is because of her name tag. We don't know exactly what happened to her, but she probably got by Satan. The first real look at the Egyptian gods came in the Season 7 episode, Defending Your Life, when the boys had to face one of the biggest names in Egyptian myth, Osiris. This dapper dude is a god of death and judgment, though he doesn't really control death nor judge the dead. Instead, he's all about judging living people who have caused death and executing those he finds guilty. That might sound awesome at first, but keep in mind that he doesn't seem to go after the most vile and unrepentant killers. Osiris can read human hearts and minds, and he finds his targets by sniffing out guilt. So, while he is going after killers, he usually ends up marking those that genuinely feel bad about their actions. Once he picks someone, he'll warp them to an isolated spot and put them on trial, with Osiris himself acting as judge, jury, and executioner. He looks into the defendants' hearts, and if they carry too much guilt, he'll sentence them to death, though Osiris doesn't do the killing himself. Instead, he summons and controls the ghosts of the defendants' victims and compels them to get poetic revenge. There is an argument to be made that he doesn't actually summon ghosts, considering that he also sends a ghost of a car after someone, but regardless of whether they're ghosts or tulpas or something else, it's still cool. Osiris is also hard to get rid of, since the Lord doesn't seem to have a way to permakill him. So if you don't have access to a super weapon like the Colt, then the best you can do is put him into a deep sleep by jabbing him with a ram's horn, which is how Sam deals with him. The final rep for Egypt's pantheon showed up in season 14, and unlike Osiris, this dude judges people based on their life choices. However, unlike Osiris, Anubis is actually an extremely fair judge, so much so that he actually got a job working for heaven. After capital G God left heaven, the angels needed help deciding who went up and who went down. They considered Osiris, but since he's not exactly unbiased, they went with Anubis, meaning that for the last several thousand years, an Egyptian god has been in charge of deciding who gets into heaven. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. According to Anubis himself, he doesn't actually decide a person's fate. His power manifests as a magical abacus that, when touched by someone, rearranges itself in order to reflect the balance of good and bad decisions. He claims to not be able to change or affect the results, meaning that as far as he's concerned, each individual person is their own ultimate judge. Because he wasn't really a villain, he's another one of the few deities to survive an encounter with the Winchesters. They do trap him in a ring of palm oil to try and force him to let a woman named Lily Sunder into heaven. However, after he makes it clear that he can't change her fate, they reluctantly let him go. So, there's only one more pantheon that the show pulled multiple representatives from. However, the inclusion and treatment of these two was one of the more controversial things in the series because it involved turning two of the most important gods from one of the most prominent modern religions into monsters. In our favorite episode, Hammer of the Gods, the writers decided that the Apocalypse Escape Planning Committee should include two gods from Hindu lore, specifically Ganesh and Kali. Ganesh didn't really get to do much. Like Odin, he was basically a glorified cameo who ultimately got shredded by Lucifer, but we did get to see him take the form of an elephant for a sec, so that's kind of fun. Kali, on the other hand, well, she actually was pretty important, as she seemed to be one of the organizers of the godly powwow. We don't get much of her backstory, but we do note that she hooked up with Gabriel while he was posing as Loki. Like some of the other gods, Kali was pretty prideful, but she was also smart enough to recognize the danger of the archangels. She also managed to find out Gabriel's true identity and ended up binding him with blood magic and stealing his sword, which seems like it was her plan all along. Now, that sword turned out to be a fake, but it was a very convincing fake, convincing enough to fool another archangel. In the end, Kali was the last god standing against the devil, and she blasts him with this super sick flamethrower attack, but ultimately it wasn't enough. However, she did actually get saved by Gabe at the last minute, making her one of the very few deities to survive the series. There's only a few more gods to talk about. However, these last few were each the only deities from their respective mythologies to appear in the show, so I'm just going to cover them in chronological order of appearance. First up, we've got Season 3's A Very Supernatural Christmas, and this episode delivered a double dose of deity in the form of Ed and Medj Kerrigan. It's not entirely clear who these two are supposed to be. Sam matches their MO to that of a Germanic god of winter solstice named Hold Nakar, but he's supposed to be one entity, not two, so who knows what's going on. Whatever the case, these two took sacrifices around the winter solstice, and in return, they'd give their local area mild winters. Like a few other pagans, these guys had a little ritual they needed to perform before they could feast, with the first step being their sacrifices draping themselves in an herb called meadowsweet. Once the Kerrigans' following dropped off, they actually adapted better than a lot of their peers. They didn't just put on a human face, they actually got jobs and became members of the community. They still needed those sweet, savory sacrifices, so Madge started making and selling meadowsweet reeds, and anyone who willingly bought them was marked as an acceptable tribute. So their grind was respectable, but in terms of power, these two are arguably some of the weakest deities in the series. Besides their physical abilities, they didn't really have any cool powers. I mean, they could make the weather nice, but, so what? Ultimately, the couple were taken out by sharp pieces of wood from an evergreen tree, by which case they got stabbed with a Christmas tree. Next up, in the Season 5 episode Fallen Idols, we've got Leshy. This freak was a Slavic forest god who could only feed on people who idolized him. He claims to have had a sizable fan base up until his forest was destroyed, though I'm not sure what his fans would have gotten from that arrangement. After that, Leshy was left loveless and hungry for years until he came up with an interesting scheme. See, Leshy had the power to shapeshift into anyone whose DNA he touched, and if he turned into someone who had a following, then he could feed on that person's fans. In 2009, he set up shop in a town with a wax museum that somehow got a hold of a few celebrities' actual personal items, thus giving him a few famous faces to wear. He ended up turning into James Dean, Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, and finally, Paris Hilton, which was the face he was wearing when Sam took him out by lopping off his head with an iron axe. If you've never watched Supernatural, then let me assure you then yes, this episode features the real Paris Hilton playing a god pretending to be Paris Hilton, who then gets decapitated. God, I love this show. Alright, we've got to revisit our favorite episode, Hammer of the Gods, one more time. In addition to all the gods I've mentioned throughout this video, there were just a few more deities present at the Elysium Fields Hotel, though, like most of the others, we don't get much info about them. First, we've got the Chinese god Zhao Shen. There are exactly two interesting things about this guy. First, while he seems to understand English, he chose to communicate in Cantonese. Second, he's the only god in the episode whose death wasn't caused by Lucifer. Instead, he got staked by Dean. Other than that, there's not much to say about him. There is a theory that he was responsible for preparing the human meat for the hotel, since his real-world counterpart is a Chinese kitchen god, but that's not been proven. The final god in this episode was Baron Samedi, and boy, is there nothing to say about him. He gets more screen time than Isis, but like her, he doesn't really do or say anything other than get cursploded by the devil. Besides his name, there's really nothing to connect him with the voodoo Loa of real-world myth. There were two other gods in this episode, but they went unnamed, and for the life of me, I couldn't make out their name tags, so God only knows who they're supposed to be. Alright, I promise I won't talk about this episode anymore in this video. So the next god on this list is a bit weird, because we don't ever actually see them. In the Season 8 episode Heartache, we hear about a Mayan god named Cacao who, in the distant past, granted a man immortality in exchange for yearly sacrifices. If I'm being honest, this is one of, if not the best blessing we see from a god. The guy in question, Inyo, was not only kept alive and young by his sacrifices, he was also given physical buffs that made him an extremely talented athlete. So Cacao can dish out some pretty cool gifts, but beyond that we don't know anything about him. In fact, there's an argument to be made that we don't know if he exists at all. Let's finish off this video with one of the oldest and freakiest gods in the show, Moloch, Canaanite god of sacrifice. Moloch was a goat-headed god who had the power to give people wealth and success in return for fresh human blood and meat. Now, when I say goat-headed, I don't just mean he had horns. No, this dude was one of the very few creatures in the whole show who looked completely monstrous, as he had horns, dark skin, and claws. We unfortunately didn't get a really good look at him, but from what we did see, he looked pretty scary. It's hard to know how powerful he was, or how he would normally operate, since by the time of the Season 12 episode, The Memory Remains, he had been enslaved for over a century. Apparently, back in the 1800s, he was somehow captured by the Bishop family, who kept him starved and would only feed him once a year in exchange for riches. There didn't seem to be much lore about this guy, probably because he came from such an old civilization. Ultimately, he ends up being the final creature in the entire show to be destroyed with the cult. Honestly, the fact that this old god from a long-dead civilization has such an inhuman form makes me wonder if all the gods used to look more godly, and like Tulpas, they actually have had their appearances updated by the collective shift in how humanity envisions them. But guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you found this video divine. Which of these gods did you think was represented the best, and which was the worst? Let me know in the comments below. I'll have more for you next month, but for now, carry on,